everyone, welcome to another Underrated Film Saturday, and today I thought it would be interesting to discuss a film that also came out fairly recently. I think actually even more recently than the last film that I discussed, or film franchise technically, Twilight. Again, Twilight was put in the overrated category, not the underrated category, but regardless, let me discuss the film Dredd. Yes, the remake of the Sylvester Stallone film. The interesting thing about this film, and as to why I think it's a little underrated, is because Judge Dredd is a very stylized film. It does kind of follow a very interesting way of presenting a story, like what originally the Judge Dredd universe surrounds itself by, because again, I believe Judge Dredd was actually based on a comic book series, and again, it sort of represents that stylized kind of atmosphere, and I don't know if that's something that's maybe gotten old for some people, or if it's something people are not really used to seeing. Again, with certain aspects of the film being in slow motion. Also, this I think ties in also with the violence. It is very graphic. This film has a lot of brutal things happen within it, and I'm not gonna lie that these things are pretty graphic in nature, so it might have deterred the mainstream audiences from getting invested in it, because maybe the violence is just too oversaturated. At least, but I don't think that's really the case. I think it was just sort of presented that way, and I think that's probably what deterred audiences from going and seeing the film. Also, the fact that it was a remake is something that probably could have stirred away people from embracing this film, I think, because since it was a remake of the Stallone film, people probably thought that since it was a remake, and again, I don't think we're seeing a huge amount of remakes being made, at least recently, so the whole, I think, idea of a remake is probably something that threw people off and made them decide not to invest in the film. But the interesting thing is that this film in particular focuses on a completely different plot than what the original Judge Dredd film did, or Dredd film technically did. So it's very different in terms of style, in terms of story, in terms of characters even too. It's nothing like the original at all, but I think since people were familiar with Dredd and already had a film based on it, I think people probably decided, yeah, no, not worth it, my time. And then we also have the fact that Judge Dredd is not your typical hero. He's not like the Avengers. He's not like Spider-Man or Superman or Batman. He's really not designed to be that kind of hero. He's more based in, again, being more of a, I guess what you could consider a Sin City kind of hero, where he is very stern and very stiff, and he is a hero in the sense that he tries to do heroic things and try to be the judge of crime lords in this film in particular, but he doesn't have really the personality or the kind of charisma that you would think that a lot of superheroes, at least nowadays, I think tend to have. Like he has this very stern, kind of unemotional appearance, And he sort of presents that throughout the film, because you don't see his eyes pretty much the entire. You don't see Karl Urban's face. You literally just see the helmet and then his lips, and then that's it. And maybe the nose too, and you could probably tell a little bit of facial expression. But really, there's not a whole lot of not really a whole lot of traditional qualities that we would associate with a hero presented in Dredd, because again, the mask, I think, plays a huge part in this, and also because again, he doesn't really display all that much emotion, that it comes off as not as something that I think people are used to. I think people are used to having heroes who have very complex backstories, or have some kind of interesting, character trait. Why is Iron Man so popular? Because Robert Downey Jr. can come off as very charismatic and even sarcastic at certain points. But Judge Dredd doesn't resemble that kind of a hero. He's just there to get the job done. He's not someone that just kind of is. He's not the hero that says, "Ooh, look at me, I'm so interesting." Again, it's the same with like other superheroes, like even with heroes like Batman. Ooh, he's very dark, he's very brooding. Ooh, he has a backstory, and he has all these interesting qualities to him. Whereas Dredd is just more of a go in, get the job done, save the day, get out. That's how Dredd's character operates. He's not designed to have any. He's what moves the plot forward. He's not somebody who he's the person we're supposed to root for, but at the same time we understand that he more represents justice and not necessarily a very in-depth character. Especially considering the fact that, again, he doesn't really display a lot of emotion, but he captures. Karl Urban, who ends up playing Dredd in this remake, captures, I think, the character really perfectly, because that's what Judge Dredd really is. He's a police officer, or technically they're called judges in the future, because apparently they do the judging too. So that they just do it in a whole one-step system. Probably would save the taxpayers a lot of money if you just have one guy just go in and say, "Yep, you're guilty. The end. I know what you did wrong." Unfortunately, this ends up having a lot more crime, because the world that Dredd takes place in is a fairly futuristic world and is riddled with crime everywhere. And the interesting thing too is that we have also another female protagonist, sort of similar to what we had with the first initial film, but the remake has her as a psyche and as a rookie judge, or a rookie cop, basically. But again, in the future of Dredd World, and I know it's not called Dredd World, but at the same time, since Dredd is the main character and that's the title of this film, the leading female protagonist, Cassandra Anderson, is one who is again a rookie, and she also has the ability to, I think they call it telepathy, where you can, when you can vision things, you can go into people's minds, and you can picture what they're thinking. I'm also not sure if she can see the future too, or if she has some kind of ability there. It's sort of it's not really categorized, I think, as well within the film, but I think it's supposed to be like that. She has this kind of telepathic or this telepathy or some kind of mind game power, because you'll see how she does things that aren't really necessarily classified, I guess, as telepathy, but they revolve around that. They revolve around this idea that she can mess with people's minds, she can go into people's minds, she can see certain things within the future, or gain a certain context. She has, I guess, a really good memory too. So I think that might contribute to the kind of telepathy that she has. And she's played by Olivia Thirlby. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I apologize. But again, it's what I mean by plot-wise is to this remake. Instead of it revolving around Judge Dredd being falsely accused of something, in this version, he's actually going out and he's actually solving a crime. And destroying a crime ring, technically, because there is this new drug on the market, and there is this evil, and this villain is very, she's just nuts, she's just crazy, but, regardless of that aspect, she's really the mob boss. She's the leader of all of the, she's basically the leader of the drug ring, of this drug that they're distributing to the populace illegally. And basically his mission is to go find this crime ring and basically destroy it. And she is really the person that he ultimately has to defeat. And there's a lot of, again, since you have a crime mob of people who are on her side, this doesn't make it all too easy. And again, we do have this sense of stakes and, the various obstacles that the two main characters in particular have to go through. And so, even though Cassandra is a rookie, apparently they're so desperate to solve crime that I guess they say, hey, Karl Urban, or aka Dredd, why don't you help this one out? Why don't you go in and try to stop a really big crime scheme or drug problem? Why don't you go do that? So that's really the main setup of the film when it comes to plot. Now, again, again, the fact that Dredd isn't the traditional kind of hero, Cassandra isn't really the traditional, I guess, female protagonist, I guess you could say, who's really put in these circumstances. Although I would say I like the fact that they do make her realistic. They make her like someone who would be in that kind of setting as a female, and I think that's very rare for films. She's kind of like Sigourney Weaver in the Alien movies. She has her feminine traits, and she uses those to sort of advance the story, even though she's put in circumstances that usually we wouldn't find a female in. So I think the film does a really good job of handling that really well. And again, the same thing with Karl Urban's character in Dredd. He just kind of nails that character off really well. But as far as, again, to it being underrated, I think largely it's in part to how it's not gory, but it is violent. It is very intense. The fact that it's a remake, the fact that Dredd isn't some traditional hero that we usually associate with, I think those all sort of contributed to the fact that this film got put to the fact of the film being pushed a little bit under the bus and not as appreciated as maybe some other superhero films. But I think it's definitely a film worth exploring. And there might be some issue, too, with the villain, because the villain, I think I would say, is she's very, I don't think she has a lot of dimension to her. She's really she's just pure crazy. Like, she's just pure evil. Like, this woman is just like insane, very psychotic. But we don't get a sense of as to why she's that way, or what drove her to these ends. But I think that's probably what the film's intention was. It's trying to create the more black and white perspective rather than trying to give this character and this bad person any dignity, because what she does in this film is pretty horrible. So yeah, I think maybe the intensity of it being too intense might throw some people off, or the fact too that this story isn't all that it's not that complex of a story. It's not that it's pretty straightforward from beginning to end. Like, you know what you're getting into, and it does feel a lot like a video game. It doesn't have the quality per se of like a video game, where the characters look all goofy, no. But it does have that same perception, because usually with video games you're going up against an enemy or going up against some force that's trying to, I guess, destroy you. And really, the film Dredd sort of plays out that way. It plays up to this idea of it being kind of like a video game, because ultimately what ends up being the outcome is really what anybody who's playing a video game would probably want to have at the end. So it really does play into that idea of a video game, because you have all of these different levels that you have to get to in order to get to the climax, which leads to the showdown between the big bad guy or big bad woman in this case, and Dredd. So again, there's a lot of levels, there's a lot of stages that the film takes, and I think it plays out a lot like a video game. And maybe when people saw the previews, I think it gave that sort of impression too, that it was trying to set up this similar kind of video game, just this similar vibe of a video game. And I think some moviegoers are not really interested in seeing that kind of a story displayed. They'd rather go see a movie than see a movie that's like a video game. But the thing is, too, is a lot of movies end up getting put in as video games later on. But I think it more just has to do with the fact that it has the bare essentials of a video game, of going through these different levels and stages, and different twists and turns. And usually films are not really structured on that. At least I think the majority of films don't really follow a video game. But again, there are a lot of exceptions, but I would say that the majority of film making is not trying to be what a video game is. And I think this film was really trying to emulate that kind of atmosphere, and that atmosphere might not appeal to some people, because they would rather see a movie than see a video game. Again, it's like a video game, but without any options. You can't change the options, but at the same time, it's really the options that you really end up wanting anyway. So yeah, especially if you're playing Dredd, unless you're playing the bad guys, which I don't know if maybe some video gamers do that, but regardless, the way the story is structured is largely like a video game, and that might deter or even excite some people. But I think that's probably why, though, it didn't get as much praise as it could have, because it didn't follow a traditional film structure. It followed a more video game oriented structure, and that, I think, made it so that people got a little bit sidetracked from it. And again, I understand too that the violence could really have deterred some people too from liking this film, and I understand that, but I still think that the film in itself is I think worth recommending, because I think what it's offering is something that I think really works. Like, I think putting in this kind of more video game aspect of, you know, going through various stages in order to get to one particular goal, I think that's something that really, really works, especially for this kind of a story. I think that even though it's a remake, it's still an interesting remake because it takes a completely different story, a completely different atmosphere, a completely different style. It changes it up, so it's not like it's a remake for the sake of being a remake. And I think that's what happens with what ends up happening with a lot of remakes, and then they end up doing a poor job. But this film, I think, is definitely an exception because it does, I think, do a remake justice. And again, the fact that Dredd is not a traditional hero is something that I think could deter some people, especially too when the first film really did focus, I think, more on trying to make him, you know, the redeemer of himself, because you know he has to, you know, rise up against the establishment, and with this, he just needs to go in and do a job. That's what he's designed to do, and so that could result in a changing of character aspects that might not be as appealing as maybe something like Batman or Spider-Man or Superman or Marvel or, you know, or DC Avengers. You know, that might not attract some people. So I think that's really all that I can say about this film. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But I thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.